Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce, and my good friend, Jonathan Fink. He is still setting up at the moment in Ukraine somewhere. So he wanted to put it back by 15 minutes. It's not going to be a particularly long one, this. I think he's got a short hour gap that he can fit this in. So it'll be sort of more like 45 minutes now, but it'd be good to catch up with him in Ukraine. I thought I would start a wee bit early just because I wanted to. I was going to do a breaking news update on this, and I thought I'd share it with you anyway. Many of you who use the same sources as me, hang out in the same places as I do online, will probably know this already. But there's been a bit of good news for the Ukrainians in terms of shooting down a helicopter, or a helicopter being shot down by their own friendly fire. We're going to talk about that just briefly to begin with. Before I do so, though, please remember to like, subscribe, and share to the channel. Super appreciated. Those who have already done so, appreciative of them. Okay, let's look at some details here. Here we have the Ukrainian Navy reporting that a Russian Ka-27 attack helicopter, or not attack helicopter, actually an anti-submarine helicopter, I guess it attacks submarines, has been shot down over the Black Sea. The question is, what has shot this down? This is really good news. It's obviously a fairly high value helicopter, has its particular niche skills or characteristics, but it has apparently been shot down. We have heard previously of, and remember the other day there was a helicopter that was taken out by supposedly friendly fire, Mi-8 AMTSH. Is that one that has electronic warfare capabilities? Anyway, that was taken down over Rostov during a big drone attack, and it's thought that that was taken out by friendly fire. But there were claims as well that that one just on, that's March the 4th, so we're only talking 2 nights ago, there was claim that that one was taken out potentially by drone, maybe an FP2 medium range drone that had somehow taken out either directly or by having a munition on board or something, who knows. But that theory was, going around concerning the helicopter that was shot down in one way or another. Now, we have got evidence of Ukrainian drones, these near, rear, or even longer distance. Actually, this is claimed to be an FP1 drone, which is your long distance drone, taking out a helicopter previously. This is 3 months ago, November the 22nd. This video is dated. And this, I don't know whether, I presume what happens is you have an FP drone that is able to be used in an FPV manner. So it's like a first person view. You're controlling it. You don't just set it on a course and it uses GPS and maybe some other mechanism to find its way to the target, then goes into terminal dive and blows up, right? FP1s and 2s appear to be remote control glorified FPV drones. And we got Jonathan just joining. I just finished this off though. This video here shows you an FPV drone being used to take out a helicopter. So it could be that this was what happened the other night. It could be that this is what's happened just now over the Black Sea. It's more likely it's air defense over the Black Sea. But just to let you know that this is an FP1 drone, so 1,600 kilometer odd ranged drone taking out a Russian helicopter back in November. So that gives us an idea that there is precedence for drones taking out helicopters, and that could be what took out the Mi-8 the other day, although friendly fire is pretty plausible as well. And then the Ka-27 that's just been taken out today. So that's really good news. I'm now going to get us to be joined by here. Hello, Jonathan.
Hello. I had a bit of a fluff up in ordering my taxi, so I'm still in the back of it, heading to the hopefully fairly quiet sort of cafe where I thought I'd be podcasting from. But I can put this to the window. People get a nice view of. There we go. That's the little pedestrian bridge. heading over the river there. That's the sunset skyline of Kyiv you're seeing there with my
Beautiful.
rather wobbly thing. There we go. It's all very pretty and not too cold. Well, I said about hovering around, I know, 3 or 4 degrees. The river's still frozen there, if people can see the frozen river. No, snow's mostly melted. Actually, no, the river's unfrozen. Yeah, that's water down there. So yeah, last time I was here, it was -20, and you could walk right across the river, and you had fishermen drilling little holes in the river. Now it's the ice is all broken up, and there's sort of there's piles of horrible snow in little corners, as it were, where the sun doesn't shine, but mostly the pavements are clear. And of course,
going to be looking where the sun doesn't shine.
Yeah, well, you don't want to look there. I mean, what it does mean, of course, is that Russia's energy terrorism has failed. That it's not quite spring yet, but it's probably not going to have persistent cold like it was, and they failed to take out the full energy infrastructure, and the spring's in sight. So yeah, that particular strategy it caused a lot of pain and misery, but it's strategically failed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'd go as far as to say it's failed. I think it has been a success by point of fact that it has really hurt the Ukrainians, but I think significantly hurt their industrial ability and commercial ability, and that affects tax dollars and the ability to fight the war. But in a long-term strategy, yeah, they didn't completely take it out. Do you get a sense that people are feeling the sense of spring coming as being a positive dimension of their psyche?
100%, 100%. It feels a lot more positive in some ways. Although, when I came a few weeks ago, a lot of people had sick elderly relatives, children, because of the persistent cold. Now there's definitely a slightly more sort of positive feeling here. And of course, the last couple of days we've had these strikes in the Middle East, and there's a very much I told you so kind of sense you're getting when you speak to a lot of people, especially if they're in some ways related to the military or the drone warfare. They just look at you with this knowing look like, well, we've been warning you, and finally you're starting to wake up. But
what do you mean? What do you mean I told you so? I told you so about what?
Oh, I told you so about the threat from Iranian manufactured drones, the threat of the drone war, what it takes to resist that. And as you probably covered already in one of your streams, you've now got a formal request by the US for Ukrainian assistance.
Turns out that Zelensky has some cards. He's got some cards.
Apparently. Actual cards,
Yeah.
It's not an empty hand after all. But yeah, there is this slight sort of, okay, we're here, we haven't gone away, and when you're ready, when you finally understand the threat, then yeah, we'll assist you, but we're not gonna go begging, as it were. We're here when you need us.
Yeah, it's interesting that Zelensky's just said today that the Middle East has expended 800 Patriot missiles in just a few days, which is more than Ukraine have expended in 4 years of war.
Yes.
So
yes.
That's just a staggering number.
Yeah,
and it shows you what Ukraine needs as well.
Yeah. It's not economic, though. I mean, shooting down Shaheeds with Patriots is
not for Shaheeds.
It's not it's not going to work, But as you say, there are other methods that are becoming more effective, but it's an arms race. I mean, just as we're starting to realize that we need to catch up, that doesn't mean that this arms race is going to stand still. It's going to be accelerating ahead. Now, unless we build an innovative ecosystem, we're not going to catch up. We're constantly going to be tailing behind, advancing technologies and advancing techniques. And of course, talking about Iran as a threat, well, Russia's a huge threat as well. That hasn't gone away.
Yeah, I was just listening to Zelensky again just now saying that we get Storm Shadows from the UK, we get also Scouts from France, we did get some ATACMs from the US, but the implication is they don't anymore. And he said that anything above the, 500 to 1,000 kilometers range is we're producing ourselves, and it's just like we've got to get on and do it ourselves. But of course, all these capability coalitions with European nations being very close to Ukraine means that hopefully we are learning from the war in a way that we won't get caught hot-footed with Shahed drone attacks in the same way that the Middle East has, and arguably the US. I mean, it makes you think that there was not a lot of forethought in attacking Iran, knowing they got a shed load of Shahed drones and not have anything to deal with them. It's just like, it blows my mind.
Oh, it's no real planning. It's also a certain degree of hubris, you know, assuming your enemy is inferior and incapable. Very, very dangerous assumption, obviously. I don't know how prepared we are. I mean, I suspect we're not prepared really at all, and what it would take for us to catch up to that threat. I mean, I'm not going to go into my most alarmist predictions of what might happen, but I think, you know, what I've seen when I was out here is mobile interception. And the unit costs of that are interesting. You know, we're not allowed to film the technology, etc., but the unit cost ratio makes a lot of sense. You've got these mobile fire units of drone interceptors, and even Ukraine needs an awful lot more of them. But if the drone, you know, let's Shahed, the average cost is $25,000 to $50,000. These interceptors cost around 5 to 10. Obviously, that unit cost is going to go down as their manufacturing scale goes up. So it's going to be much more close to that sort of $5,000 mark. Well, that's a great ratio. If you're knocking out a $50,000 Shahed with a $5,000 interceptor, Dziękuję. Yeah. Yes, if we do. Dziękuję. There we go. I've arrived. Hooray.
Hey.
Yay. We've got our ubiquitous generators outside the cafes. And this is, you'll be familiar, this is Coffee Records. Yay.
Yay. I was there with you and Rick, the Ukrainian. I haven't spoken to him for ages.
No. Oh, and it looks like all the seats inside are full. I'm gonna sit out here in the balmy vestibule area for a bit. Excellent. And then I'll go in there. Excellent stuff. No, so this sort of ratio seems to make a lot of sense. You've got a van full of equipment with, I guess, a cut down version of the battlefield management system, the monitoring system that sees all the feeds coming in. You've got a little radar unit that can control the drone, and the drone is. And these little vans are in like innocuous white vans. They could be going down the road. You wouldn't know them from Adam. They look like standard kind of builder's van. But in the back, you've got this extraordinary monitoring equipment, and you can troll up in a field. You've got another van that contains the firing unit that shoots the drone up into the sky with, high pressure compressed air at a couple of 100 kilometers an hour, punches it into the air, and these things. I mean, they were telling me that just by chance, because they were developing these as combat drones. I was just there yesterday. Who's that?
That's James. You know James?
Oh, that's James. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We met James at Ingvald. Yes. Ingvald. Yeah. Well, we had dinner yesterday in a lovely Georgian restaurant last night. Yeah, these things. I mean, they didn't develop them as interceptors. I think they developed them as combat drones, for which they turned out not to be that cost effective. And then just by chance, a Shahed was flying over, and they were like, well, let's see if we can take it out. Now, of course, they create quite a backdraft from the motor, and you need to be able to accelerate faster and still have the kinetic force. They didn't believe that was possible, but they struck this journal. They realized that this unit had enough kinetic force to accelerate even into the backdraft and to actually take out the Shahed. And they were like, oh wow, okay, let's do it. So they've developed this concept off the back of it. I can't say who and what, and I can't show pictures of it. They also carry explosives. So if the kinetic strike doesn't, for some reason, fails to take it out, they can, detonate the explosive, and it can be packed with flechettes as well, which could take it out. So this is extremely cost-effective ratio. And of course, you can rock up in one of these units. But Ukraine, just Kyiv alone, would need many hundreds, potentially, of these units to have complete coverage against drones. And then if you multiply that out to European cities, but if you compare it to the investment required for Patriot batteries,
it's cheap as shit. You just need some training.
A fraction of that. Yeah.
And you need, I mean, Zelensky's talked about, and Fedorov, I think, have talked about the teams. They need, one of the variables, as you mentioned, is a team, right? You need it's not just the drone itself. You need the vans, you need the radars, target acquisition, and you need
there's about a dozen people there. You need a dozen people really to mount it. And the good news is, potentially, if you get the right flight path, these vans can contain, a couple of dozen drones. So you could theoretically take out quite a lot of Shaheeds. And in fact, this unit alone, during some of the major raids over the winter, has taken out many dozens of Shaheeds. And the good thing about it as well is they flip from training mode to interception mode. There we go. I've got my stand there, so I won't drop my phone. So if actually they see on the radar drones coming over, and they can see right into Russia, Belgorod, Kursk, so that actually they can plot the interception quite a long time in advance. And there's not really any secrets. I mean, Russia will know what the Delta management system is capable of. They hack each other's feeds. It's something Russia has, probably a version of that as well. So it's no great secret there. But you can sort of plan that. You can plan the interception. If you see them coming over, you can get in place. But you can take out a lot. You can take out a lot if they're coming over. You just need to have large area coverage, which of course means investment in a lot more of these fire units, a lot more trained up teams.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And it's something I think that maybe international volunteers could help with. I don't know. Ukraine are very particular about foreign people and not having the language and what they do.
Yeah.
But in principle, because I always think like how especially if you want to be a foreign volunteer, but don't also want to be someone sitting in a trench getting bombarded by like whatever. Like this is something that you could man up with other people. I would think
potentially,
I don't know.
I think for this particular unit, I think they're looking for not necessarily ex-military, but they're looking for. There's going to be a lot of military people involved there. I think there is a newly formed.
By volunteer, by the way, I didn't mean like randos. I meant like if instead of getting foreign military in to fight on the front, you get foreign military in to do that, and then the people that could do that can fight on the front.
That's it. And we want to go into too much detail, but I think some of the foreign volunteer battalions haven't been particularly successful, not because of the volunteers or the lack of skills or whatever, just because they haven't necessarily been organized or commanded the right way, because usually the senior commander is Ukrainian, and people will tell you that it hasn't quite worked out. So actually a lot of the volunteers are now transitioned, as you say, into Ukrainian battalions, where they can be more effective, like Azov and others. The best fighters are going to be absorbed by more, let's say mainstream corps or battalions. There is a new unit that's been formed of foreign air defense, a mobile air defense unit, which is staffed by expats. That's in the process of being formed. Yeah. That's just been formed. I mean, it was illegal until recently, actually. But the law was changed. I won't sort of go into details there, but that's an interesting concept. It's another way of also engaging with foreign media. So again, I'm not reviewing anything particularly sensitive here, because Times Radio have already done an interview and done some coverage of that formation of the foreign air defense unit. I think, however, probably their methodologies are not using interceptors. Their methodology is using the old sort of Bren gun, kind of thing. So that's, I don't want to call it performative, because I think there's still a role for that stuff, I'm told, but actually most of the real hits or protection is being done by interception.
I think Zelensky said 70% recently, or Fedorov, right. One of the two. So
that was the figure. Yeah. Because they come at a high trajectory and then they drop in. So actually, using the old sort of brain gun stuff, that worked at the start of the war, but it's not really as effective now.
If they're flying above 2,000 meters, you're struggling to get a Browning machine gun to take them out. But I mean, it's different for something like Skynex and these larger systems, and you've got the new ones coming from Sweden, the BAE Bofors Trident Mark IIs. These are they're going to receive 25 of them. They've got a 12-kilometer range, which is huge, but I don't know if that's because they can be fired horizontally, so I don't know what their range would be going upwards. But anyway, certainly seems more, and they look pretty good. But yeah, it's just about having whatever it is you have. You need enough of it. This war is about scale, whether offensive or defensive, and every I keep saying every major weapon is a game changer. Like an FP1 drone, FP2 drone, FP5 Flamingo is a game changer. Like if you have enough of them. Like Taurus would be a game changer if you had 1,000 of them to fire a day. Yeah, frickin' you just destroy everyone.
None of them game changer, but not a silver bullet. I mean, no one munition class is a silver bullet here, and I think this idea of it being a war of economics is valid. Now, that doesn't mean that Ukrainians treat human life differently. Russians don't care, obviously, and Russians will attach far more value to hardware than software, i.e. the human squishy component often is far more expendable than equipment. Ukrainians have obviously a different perspective, which is that human life largely needs to be preserved, and where possible. Now, this isn't always the case. Obviously, a lot of people realize that if they end up in the wrong battalion, or if they're mobilized rather than choosing where to serve, or don't necessarily have a skill and end up in the infantry, then yeah, you can get commanders that make sort of weird decisions and don't receive feedback from further down the chain. So your life could be wasted based on absurd decisions. That does happen. But if you have a skill, or you want to develop a skill, let's say in drones, vampires, or whatever, you have the option to choose where you go, and to look at battalions who are more effective. I can't guarantee you're going to be used sensibly, but you can choose places where there's a far higher probability that your life is going to be valued and your skills valued.
I think the reorganization of the entire armed forces really into these corps, and then further kind of reorganization recently of air defenses, something that I don't know if that's Fedorov, but certainly something that has been done recently because the interception rates were going down. I think stuff like that's been really, really important, and it probably doesn't get enough credit. I think using units that are really good units with a good pedigree and legacy to then form the basis of larger sort of units, to become these corps, and taking less decent or well-organized or well-trained units under their wing to share best practice. I think it's really important, and you're seeing I think an improvement in generally, but it's just a classic problem for Ukraine is boots on the ground, really.
It's boots on the ground. It's also, unless you really create the momentum that commanders who are perhaps older or have a more Soviet style, unless you physically move them aside and you create a far more upwardly mobile culture, then it's quite difficult, And I think those unmanned systems units that are effective, they can't go in and just sort of dabble and tinker. They have to go in and take over ineffective battalions entirely, hook, line, and sinker. That, of course, is going to be resisted by those who are going to be pushed aside. So it's a big challenge, and unless you have, dare I say, extraordinary pressure from above, you're gonna, they are making improvements and changes, but unless you have real force from the administration that pushes this through, it's not going to happen that quickly, and I'm guessing it's not happening fast enough. But all you have to do in some ways is outpace your enemy. You just have to lower the unit cost of defense compared to offense. You have to increase the ratio of your adversaries dying and being wounded compared to yours. So even if there are myriad problems, you just have to be that bit better than your adversary, and the unit costs pan out.
That's a really important way of looking at it, which is, it's all about you relative to the other, not you relative to some kind of idealist benchmark. It's like we just need to be,
or a fictitious a fictitious NATO force. I mean, I'm sure you've discussed ad infinitum that exercise where 2 battalions of high-end NATO platforms was wiped out in, the press release said half a day, but I'll let you into a little secret there, just between us and the audience there. Don't tell anybody else. But I did an episode on that where I said, the press release says these 10 Ukrainian drone operators wiped out these, in half a day. And then somebody who actually, within NATO, organized the exercise, got in touch with me directly within an hour of the episode going out and said, actually, the forces were wiped out in less than an hour. But we just thought that was too brutal to put in the press release.
Yeah, and this goes to show, talking about, I was saying that we'll be somewhat prepared, but actually just doctrinally in terms of training, we are woefully unprepared.
We're not prepared, yeah.
Particularly for the kind of FPV on the ground warfare. And I think, NATO is going to have to really pick it up from now on in, but this is the importance of getting Ukraine into NATO, right? It's for NATO's like the pushback
getting
for
NATO
Ukraine,
in Ukraine, I think is what you mean. Yeah,
because like the pushback to Ukraine joining NATO is just stupid. It's ideological, but it's stupid. Like, why would you not want like the most experienced nation in modern warfare to join a warfare force? Like why would you not want that? It's just, honestly, it makes me go nuts.
They've shown themselves to be far more innovative, far more flexible. They've shown themselves to be able to move at speed and far more solution oriented. They're focused on cutting unit cost and just driving a coach and horses through the usual procurement. And then there's a key difference here, is that NATO is still driven by governments, large government procurement processes, bureaucracies, and a traditional Cold War mentality, which is solutions are mandated by governments. And maybe in the context of Second World War and stuff, that works really well, or the context of the Cold War, that worked really well. But innovation is not being driven by central government here, let's be honest. Even with Brave One and that kind of stuff, the majority of innovation and even the funding of that innovation and the testing of it is not being done by central government. They're stepping in to perhaps scale stuff that works and to try and hook up foreign investors to produce that scale. All the innovation that has happened here is down to civic society, volunteers, self-organizing and working to form now what have become the cause that we know, but they were essentially volunteer battalions, Azov, Third Assault, etc.
With some other interesting additions, like Eric Schmidt, who is a former guy in charge of Google. He's got his setup and he's making AI drones and stuff that apparently are making quite a difference. So it's that mixture of...
No comment, yeah. Exactly, yeah. No, they are making a difference, and he's got a serious investor, yeah.
Yeah. And that's the kind of guy you want as well, a guy with some serious, tech chops. Here is a super chat and a comment from Schritzdog, who says, meanwhile, Fox News is showing how great the American AI drones are at taking down drones. Only problem is it's a Wild Hornet drones and the footage is from Ukraine. I've not heard this. Okay. So, I take that with a pinch of salt. But if that is the case, that's hilarious, Schritzdog. Thank you for that. And Wild Hornets, they are one of the decent manufacturers doing a good job with the interceptor drone. I showed a video this morning. I don't even see my hits and losses Schwitz, but I saw I showed a Wild Hornets drone being caught on camera by another interceptor drone, just literally. So this other interceptor drone is going marginally faster than the Shahed, and it's trying to catch it up, and it will get there, because we've seen some of these ones where they're actually quite slow. And this Wild Hornet drone, so this is already going however many hundreds of kilometers an hour. This Wild Hornet drone just goes past the one that's filming it, trying to catch up, goes past it and blows up the Shahed and gets there first. And that's like, yep, that's a decent bit of kit, that Sting drone.
Yeah, and it's not. I mean, I don't know what Western capabilities we have. Certain people assure me that we have a bunch of stuff. I'm assured by others that the British Army are taking things now quite seriously in terms of cooperating with Ukraine and with more monitors, observing the tech. Whether that actually filters down to sort of mass scale production and indeed the training and the culture, as you say, it's not just about the drones, it's the dissemination of that to tens of thousands of operators,
But the other thing that we're doing, which is really important, that these capability coalitions that bring it. So, for example, the UK and Latvia are leading the drone capability coalition, and when that turns into co-production as well. So there's a kind of like a mixture of MOD, industry, politics, and economic, all of these things coming together. So when we've got this £200 million investment of UCA spec systems in Mildenhall in Suffolk, there's going to be an element of like, yeah, this is brilliant, it's creating jobs, we're helping Ukraine, we're producing loads of stuff, but you guarantee we're also going to be there going, yep, and when we need these drones, thank you very much, we'll be able to produce them for ourselves at scale. So I think where we get into bed with the Ukrainians from a manufacturing and economic co-production point of view, that's very important for us from a national security point of view too. And it's good
very,
to see.
very much so. I mean, the Brave One strapline from earlier in the year is test in Ukraine. So whether you're building, largely Western drones, or whether I think the preference, of course, is to do co-production. We know a couple of people who are involved in that. I mean, that's always the best way, because then you get the communication cycle, the near real-time data and so on. But the idea that if you're trying to simulate a battlefield environment in Estonia or Eastern Europe, it's just not going to be the same. It is absolutely not going to be the same as battle tested. And you covered a lot on your channel, the iteration cycles. 3 months in terms of hardware, you need to be innovating, not necessarily changing every element out, but improving. But the software iteration cycle is 3 weeks. There's a strong likelihood that a drone that is coded up 3 weeks ago is really not going to work on many places or any places on the front line. That's an iteration cycle that cannot be solved by just a production line tweaks. You have to have a kind of ecosystem. And I was talking to a lady earlier who's very much involved with foreign media, but also connected with the military, and she takes journalists out. She was saying that the fundamental thing here is you've heard that phrase, is it the Kevin Bacon effect, or how many layers of distance are you from somebody else?
Yeah.
I can't remember what the actual phrase of it were. Degrees of separation. That's it. And we were thinking about this, and we had a little game where I'd name somebody that I wanted to reach, and she'd sort of say, okay, and we figured out that she was no more than 2 degrees of separation from almost anybody in Ukraine, right up to the highest levels of government. And that's not everyone, obviously, because not everyone's involved in this, but those who are really
like
engaged.
Fairlamb or something.
It's someone, yes, it was Deborah I met for lunch, yes.
Did I guess right then? I literally knew who you were talking about.
Yeah. Well, I had this conversation with 2 people. One's a Ukrainian media producer, and one was Deborah at lunchtime. Yeah. And we played this game with both of them. And they say, if you're really networked and plugged in, you're 2 degrees of separation from anyone. And if you've got a real problem or you're seeking a solution, then that network is invaluable in reaching the people you need. We need to develop that. We need to have that sort of fluidity of communications. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And that's not something that you can, probably not something that you can just put in place. I guess that's quite organic. And that comes out of the war, and it comes out from a community. It probably comes out from a Kyiv kind of community where you've kind of pulled up the drawbridges. Kyiv is defending itself. It's a center of Ukrainian society, politics, and defense. And you've got all sorts of people mixing around that area as a result of the war, like volunteer people, venture capitalists, people like Deborah Fairlamb, who are like
the tech sector and so on.
And I think that's something that comes out of Ukraine being at war, as opposed. So if we were to go back and say, right, let's sort that out in the UK. It's kind of like it's born out of necessity, I guess.
It comes, you can't mandate it by government. You can't sort of, write a proclamation and magic into existence. It also works from a solution-oriented mindset. So, excuse me. So, I think, and it's not just 2022. This dates back to 2014 and earlier, and the multiple revolutions, but also the emergence of the outsourced programming tech sector in Ukraine. So there's some hope potentially for Britain, at least, because despite Brexit, we still have one of the largest inbound investments in tech and one of the
Yeah, and
largest
they're
sort of
coming
tech
at the moment. There's a
entrepreneurial
lot
community.
going
Yeah.
on at the moment in AI and tech coming to the
Yep.
UK and setting based up in London. What's frustrating is that we've just had we had this digital ID thing that was we're trying to get up, which is a really simplistic thing, just your basic details, and then that's been shot down by naysayers who don't understand it. It's like, well, if you've got Facebook as a private company already have more data on you than the government was wanting. If you've got the NHS app, which most people have,
Yes.
that the government's already got that stuff. So what's your freaking problem about having so if we've got a society that won't allow us to have that, then and you look at every other European nation and they all have like I was speaking to my mate from Sweden. Well, he's British, but he's living in Sweden at the moment. We had a weekend away, and he is like, it's so cool in Sweden. You just everything is done via your like your government security ID, and you log on to everything, and it's all connected, and it's just brilliant. And it's like, and Britain, we're all like, Ukraine has the Deer app, which you can get married on, and you can pay your parking fine, your speeding fine on it. You're like, what we worry about?
Let me throw a little fly in the ointment there, because actually there's a solution to this. You can encrypt that data, you can ensure that that data remains private, but the encryption layers required for that scale of data and that application use is immense. So if you invest in the right architecture, then I think absolutely you develop that stuff. And I'm not going to go into detail, but let me throw a little kind of alternative bomb into the idea of Deer. Well, what if there was a backdoor?
Let people know Deer is that central app that the Ukrainians have that is like a world-leading app that centralizes everything. Yeah, carry on.
It you know, it's all your social security, it's all your details, your address, your profession, your work address, it's all in there. What happens if actually you did it on the cheap and you didn't install the right sort of encryption protocols? What if your adversary got access to that and was therefore able to know the location of every single person in your intelligence services, your military, your civic society, right down to their home and office address? That, which is an incredible strength, suddenly becomes an absolute roadmap to screw you up big time. Now, I'm not going to say any more. I'm just going to throw that out there as a potential risk, and you can work back to 2022 and figure out what the implications of that might be. Also, the raid on Treasury data. So you can have this stuff, but if, let's say, you give someone like Elon Musk and Doge, and they do a sort of data raid on this, well, guess what? Suddenly you know where all the migrants are, everybody, their ethnicity, their background, etc. And there, of course, are some credible rumors that ICE is using the Treasury data that was raided by Doge to do their raids on various ethnicities. So what is a strength could become an incredible weakness if you start heading into an authority. If you're not managing it, or you head into an authoritarian slide. So it could be, an external threat that gains access to the data, or it could be an internal threat. So I just throw that out there. But the fact is, as you say, it's not that that data isn't available somewhere else. And of course, we know that all the stuff that comes out of Facebook and everything else is eminently hackable, and at various points has probably been packaged up and sold anyway. So there are various issues involved there, I think.
Yeah, I just think there's an awful lot to learn off Ukraine in so many ways in how they do certain things. It's one of those funny countries where, you look at somewhere like Kyiv, and it's this metropolitan, modernized city in many respects, with a young, vibrant population. Arguably, obviously, war has had its effect. But there's a lot of innovation, and yet you can go out into these villages out in the middle of nowhere in Ukraine, and it's like the complete opposite end of the spectrum. But they actually there's a coexistence there, which is they absolutely love, and they love that traditional aspect of society as well as the modern, forward-looking aspects. What else have you gleaned? How long have you been out there this time?
So this is just a week. So arrived on. Maximum confusion here. Tuesday morning. I arrived on Tuesday morning. My train unusually was late, but that's because I quite liked it actually, because every mode of transport I took was late. So I was freaking out about whether I'd make the transition point. But in Poland, the follow-on train in Lublin waited because it knew the train coming in was late. So it just waited for waited for about 15 minutes after its, scheduled departure time, because it didn't want to, let all the people down, and it knew that some of them would have a transition onwards. Then I was kind of freaking out that we'd get to Helm late, but it turned out that another train that was coming in was actually more than an hour late because of an accident. Well, the Helm train to Kyiv decided to just wait for the passengers, because otherwise they'd all be stranded in the middle of nowhere and nowhere to stay, and it would cost them a lot of money. So the train just left about 2 hours after its nominated departure time, just to make sure it got everybody, which I thought was kind of nice. Yeah, was, you wouldn't get that in Jobsworth, Britain. No. So it means I arrived Tuesday morning, and I freshened up, and then literally just a couple of hours after arriving and having lunch, we drove out to about 80 kilometers north of Kyiv and spent the night doing drone interception. Wow. Which was, and then arrived back in the wee hours after spending the night in a field watching extraordinary things happen. And it's training, so it's kind of interesting, because you like this detail. These drones are reusable, not if they hit a Shaheed. I mean, there's nothing left of the Shaheed or the drone. They got about 1.5 kilos of explosive in there, so there's not much left after that. But for a training mission, they pack a little parachute where the explosive payload would be. So the thing actually, you can fly it around, test it, do your training, and then it'll actually return back to your base to be reused. So it's a very smart use of tech.
Yeah, I'd heard of various versions of this kind of thing. I mean, there's this French drone wall thing that apparently is being used somewhere in Ukraine, where you don't need training on it. It's really simple. It's all done by kind of AI, where you have like 100 drones, whatever it is, has target acquisition of the Shahed, for example. You just press a button, they all take off, and it becomes like a drone wall, and then they attack the Shahed, and then all those that don't blow up the Shahed then come back down and land, and then you use it again.
That's smart.
So so
it's sensible. It's very sensible. Yeah.
What's your sense of? Have you spoke to anyone about, say, the attacks down in Gallipoli, and whether people are upbeat about what Ukraine are doing, how exhausted the Russians are? Not so much. I mean, the big topic I want to ask people is whether they're worried about this supposed mobilization, the large-scale mobilization that's happening in Russia. But then when you run the numbers, it doesn't appear as large-scale as we thought. Because my first concern there is, well, if Russia is gathering a ton of troops, maybe they'd be looking to punch through or do some kind of massive incursion, but it doesn't look like the mobilization numbers really allow for that. It's more of Putin's sort of incrementalism, actually. And the Ukrainians I've spoken to, they're just like, orcs are going to orc, and we're going to take them out, and there doesn't seem to be an overwhelming concern. I mean, one of the conversations, of course, is where next. And I think everyone's now fairly aware for where the Russians are going to attack.
Yeah, what's going to be the next Bakhmut, what's going to be the next Pokrovsk, even though Pokrovsk hasn't fully fallen. And Konstantinivka obviously is under contention, but now you've got Slavyansk and Kramatorsk starting to be, as they say, cabbed. The KAB bombs are they're trying to, how should you say it, ethnically cleanse or clear out the civilian population. So the opinion of several people I've spoken to is the next, but possibly final battles of this war are going to be Kramatorsk and Slavyansk. If those go, and that will take probably a couple of years, then you've got some fairly formidable lines of defense further back. And then the next major conurbations are quite a long way away. You've got a lot of empty space between that and, say, Pavlograd and Dnipro. So actually, I think a lot of people think that's the final front, and Russia will expend itself to the point of exhaustion over 2 years, taking those places. Now, I know we do a lot of videos, a lot of people in our community do a lot of videos about Russia's falling, running out of men, running out of money, blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. I think a lot of people here, from what I've spoken to, believe that Russia can probably carry on going for 2 years, but that it won't really achieve much substantial in that time. But you are seeing the population started to be flushed out or moved on, and apparently the roads are deteriorating. So I'm guessing that central government is not necessarily investing in those roads around those cities. One, because it's just a waste of money if they're eventually going to fall, but also you don't want to hand over decent road networks to the Russians. So by letting the infrastructure slide, you're ensuring that eventually when the Russians do take those places, they're basically inheriting a pile of rubble and have expended hundreds of thousands of bodies for nothing.
Yep, you give that vocal cord some.
I got very emotional. Got very emotional on that one, but yeah. But that seems to be, and I guess the drone skill and the drone capabilities are scaling considerably, and now potentially you might have an influx of Western investment. But certainly the scale of the drone production here is, as you know, is immense and growing.
Yeah, I do. I mean, the challenge for the Ukrainians in that respect is the susceptibility of these factories to be targeted and hit. Like, I was speaking to someone recently that said they were out in, I don't know, somewhere like, for example, Zakarpattia, somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, effectively, and they passed basically a factory that had just been completely flattened. And it's like that was hit by missiles a couple of months ago, and the implication is that was FP1 or whatever. That was some kind of military industrial complex that the Russians have found flattened. You don't hear about because Ukrainians are good at OPSEC, but this is a continued problem for the Ukrainians. That of course anywhere where they're trying to build stuff is going to be target number one for the Russians. And
repair stuff, vehicle repair centers, all sorts of installations. But it's fairly distributed. I mean, yes, that's terrible, and it does have an effect. But I think what you've got is a fairly distributed network of manufacturing. So yes, they can hit a few things here and there, which they are. But that doesn't take out, that's not a systemic or existential risk to the whole ecosystem, because it's just, some of it's clearly going underground, and some of it is just, broken down into smaller units of production and distributed all over the place. So I don't know whether that'll work. Yeah, there are. So and of course, the Ukrainians are far more distributed than Russia. Russia can only really do the centralized production. They're not going to trust their population to have little cottage industry drone factories all over the place. No way. They're as you say, Yellowbug and others, they centralize it in big complexes and plants. So this is the real horizontal versus a vertical. And in that sense, I think Ukraine has the real advantage there. Yeah, it's more difficult to get scale going, but at the same time, it's far more resilient by distributing the production horizontally.
Yeah, and I've always been most excited about Ukraine scaling up production or scaling up procurement of weaponry, distance weaponry, stuff that's going to really hurt the Russians without hurting themselves. So, it's really interesting when you look at Iran, the US and the Israelis, let's, forget about morality and legality and all that kind of stuff. From a military point of view, this is like classic DEAD, SEAD, destruction of enemy air defense, or in this case, destruction of their entire navy, their planes. You spend weeks and weeks and weeks just bombing the crap out of Iran, so that then they just cannot function as an armed force, and then you have control of the skies. And the US is saying that they're going to have control of the skies in the coming days. If that's true, that is phenomenally successful for the Americans and Israelis to have done that so quickly. Now, of course, the Russians didn't do that at the beginning of the war because they weren't really planning on a war. They're planning on a special military operation where they just changed the government around. That didn't happen. Stuck in a war, didn't do the initial stuff, and you've got contested airspaces ever since. What Ukraine need to do is kind of go back to the beginning and try and destroy all that stuff from a distance, but they need more planes and they need more missiles and more drones. And so for me, it's all about distance weapons, and that's what I've said for 3-4 years now. It's the same thing I'm saying all the time, but we're starting to see a little bit of, like, Magyar this morning released data that they destroyed 54 air defense systems this winter and radars. So they're really trying to degrade that, and then that allows you corridors for your drones to then go out and go into Russia. So it's all coming, but you know, they have to do it the hard way, the Ukrainians, rather than having 200 planes and inordinate numbers of missiles.
It's a long distance and high altitude, getting larger payloads, longer distances into Russia, because of course a lot of their air defense systems and electronic warfare is centered along the border, Belgorod, Kursk, etc. So, as we know, a lot of stuff's getting shot down. I mean, Ukraine is sending a lot of stuff into Ukraine. Ukraine is sending a lot of stuff into Russia, but a lot of it is getting intercepted because it's having to go at low altitude and it's not getting through. So the sweet spot, of course, is to send stuff with much higher payload at a much higher altitude. Once you get beyond a certain level, actually, you know, factories and installations deeper into Russia do not have the air defense or the electronic warfare or the capabilities. So it's getting over that initial kind of almost like drone wall. And I won't give any details, but there are myriad solutions in development to achieve that. Once that happens, I think Russia is seriously screwed, because these things get over several problems: the altitude problem, the payload problem, and the accuracy problem. You know, if you can solve those three and do it at scale, you're then going to be heading into Russian territory that's a real soft underbelly, that has no real defense, no capability to shoot it down, and where a lot of the industry has been, you know, relocated to a lot of really strategic stuff. I think so. The long-term dynamics seem to be very much in favor of Ukraine, I think.
So this is why I have this, there's this tension in my head, which is, of course, we want this war to end as quickly as possible, but as quickly as possible, not from an American point of view. I'll keep it quick.
I'll be 5 minutes now.
Yeah, so we want the war to end as quickly as possible, but not from like the American quickly as possible point of view. We want it as quickly as possible, but with a just and lasting ending for Ukraine. But also, if you end it too quickly, Ukraine cannot get the advantage that we hope they're going to get from these developments. So what you need them to do is be able to take an advantage onto the negotiating table, which means that the war needs to go on long enough that Ukraine can hammer home some kind of advantage, if indeed that reality will come about.
I mean, my comment on that is, we go back to the very first part of the war. We go back to the raw mentality of Russia itself and what the West doesn't understand. Russia is a gopnik, where you cannot negotiate with a gopnik if they've come to steal your shit. You know, you got to, as someone described, you punch them in the face until they F off. So if this war was to end at this point where Russia has not learnt the lesson, then it will come back for more. It has to feel the absolute sting, the absolute pain, and that's not the Russian people. That is the regime. Has to understand that if you go against Ukraine, you're going to get slapped so badly that it's just not worth it. It's a bit like, you know, Ukraine needs to become, you know, not the steel porcupine, but the hornet's nest, so that Russia thinks, like, I'm not going to poke my stick into that again. I've learned that that's bad news. It's a sheer animal response, and unfortunately, until we learn to deal with Russia in those raw terms, psychological, physical terms, we're not going to deter them. And I think we're a long way from really understanding that or dealing with that. You know, we have not imposed costs on Putin that are existential to his regime, or which have inflicted real pain on him that makes him think, hang a second, this really isn't worth it. We haven't done that, and we're self-deterring. So yeah, as you say, Ukraine has to be able to deliver those painful blows to Russia.
Yeah.
It's not about treaties. I mean, this is all nonsense. You have to inflict a deep psychological wound on Russia, so it knows
to the table.
Force them to the table, and beg them. They need to come begging, not with conditions and demands, but just literally begging to stop being slapped and beaten. And make them understand that they shouldn't come back, because that's exactly what they'll experience if they ever try this again. Ukrainians understand that. We do not in Europe yet understand that.
Well, look, I will let you go then. Look, JD here says, "Yo, why is Jonathan always in some swank ass coffee shop nowadays? I'm jelly, fancy ass mofo."
Yeah.
I've met Jonathan a couple of times, and I don't know. Would
I'm
I
not
ever call
swanky
him
geezer. No,
a
I'm not a
fancy ass
swanky geezer.
mofo? I
No,
don't
I'm not.
know.
I'm
I'm
not
not sure
that.
I
No,
would.
I'm not. It's not a good description of me, and I've got my, skanky t-shirts and stuff. If people want
Skanky.
more of
That's the word.
this,
That's definitely the
that's
word.
a skanky. Yeah. If people want more of this stuff, I'll be doing a live stream with Rick in about an hour's time.
Oh, brilliant! Oh, give my
From
love to
Coffee
Rick, my man.
Records. So
From where
check
you
out
are.
Rick the Ukrainian. Yeah, exactly.
Well, mate,
I'm going to get myself some
give him a hug
swanky
for me.
coffee and cakes first, though.
Yeah, make sure you give Rick a hug for me, though, mate.
I will do. Absolutely will do.
Well, look,
And quick one as well. Can I
Yeah.
quickly mention this as well? If anyone's interested, next Wednesday, 11th of March, in the Ukrainian Social Club in Holland Park, London, the great Satan itself, Roman Trochamets is going to be doing a little event.
Oh, brilliant.
So if anyone wants to come to that, it's details on the community page on my website. I'll send you a little graphic to share maybe with your audience. But if anyone fancies coming, and if they haven't experienced the Ukrainian Social Club in North London, it's fantastic. You can get vareniki and all that stuff, and they've got some Lviv beers there. It's a brilliant place. But Roman's going to be showing a short film of his military service, but also the traumatic brain injury he received. And then we're going to have a little panel discussion, and then lots of chance for the audience to fire questions at him. So that's 6 p.m. next Wednesday. Come and join us.
Awesome sauce. Well, look, Jonathan, you look after yourself, and if you're there for a few more days, we can do this again in another coffee shop. Just make sure it's equally, swanky and whatnot. Make sure you change your underwear. Make sure you present yourself nicely.
We could do it from the train, leaving Kyiv. Depends if I've got other people in the coupe or not. I don't want to piss them off, but
Yeah, well, look, shoot me a message and we'll do this again. Everyone else, I'm going to stay on here and just do some thank you for the super thanks. But Jonathan, I'll let you go and schmooze.
Brilliant. Great to see you.
And you, my
see
man.
See you soon, JP. Bye.
Ta-da. Big love. So that was Jonathan Fink being typically finky and funky. And quite frankly, awesome. So thank you to him for that. I just want to say a thank you to the super chatters. You know they exist. Dear Pete and Spring, your friends are grateful. I don't know who that refers to. I only know Pete Fouché is the only guy I can think there. If you're calling Jonathan, Pete and Spring, that's a reference I don't get, but thank you. You know they exist. BME UK, just a little for your Yorkshire tea. JP, good to see Fink is safe. Slava Ukraini, thank you, BME. Very kind of you. And Moondog, great work. You're doing excellent content. Or that's very kind of you to say so. Thank you for the feedback there. It warms my cockles. We have the pirate. Please hit like, share, and let's get to 100,000 subscribers. Quite frankly, I really genuinely think YouTube hates me. I crawl along at the smallest rate, but I'm happy with life. But it would be nice. So thank you, pirate. Wenzel Coxswain says, howdy from Colorado. Thanks for all you do, Jonathan. And Jonathan, I meant to say that to Jonathan. That's why I had that one highlighted. Paul Gilbert, for some Aussie Tim Tams to go with your tea. They're now available at Tesco. Love a Tim Tam Slam. I can't remember. I backpacked around Australia in 1996. I can't imagine I didn't have Tim Tams, but maybe I didn't. Who knows? I was just a mere 19-year-old backpacker having the time of my life. So I was probably more invested in drinking slabs of beer. But thank you, Paul, for that and for that Tim Tam tip. Tim Tam tip. Tahir, eroding road systems, civil airlines, harbours, trains. Looks like troops will take longer time to provide. I guess you mean to get where you're going. I don't know if you're referring to Iran or Ukraine, but of course logistics are super important to take out. And part of the problem with Europe's response to being at war, if we were, is NATO recognized this a couple of years ago, and they've started thinking much more carefully about what happens if we get involved in a war, because if you have to move a whole bunch of tanks from, say, Portugal all the way over to Poland, then you've got bridges and roads and railways that aren't good enough to get really heavy goods across, like really heavy vehicles like tanks. And so, you know, don't just take for granted that you can logistically do what you want to do without having put forethought into it. But in terms of going to war, of course, these kind of things are definitely serious targets. Thank you all for your super chats. I really appreciate you. So, what do we have here? Some Tim Tams reference. You had to have had a Tim Tam if you were backpacking through Australia. Yeah, my memory. I mean, you know, when you go to places like Nimbin, your memories aren't quite as clear as maybe they should have been. But there you go. That's life as a backpacker. Thank you, everybody. Slava Ukraini, of course. I'm hopefully keeping you up to date with what's going on in Ukraine, but also still trying to keep half an eye on Iran and the US and Europe and everything. I have a full analysis of the Iran, Trump, Starmer, Sanchez debacle thing. That's going to be coming out shortly. I've recorded that fully, so I'll release that in probably an hour or so. Appreciate you guys. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you to the mods. Thank you to Discord, Grimsoft, who sorts that out. Thank you to JR, who's helping out with fundraising, and Benny Pie for doing loads of stuff to do with IT. You're all absolute legends. Big love to you, and I'll speak to you soon.